Before we begin, 3 messages. So, you've taken some of the advice that has come from Untether.tv guests, built an app, and now you're turning your attention to generating some hard-earned revenue. Then you should be looking at Pontiflex app leads. Some of your peers who are using app leads are earning CPMs 100 times the industry average. And if you need any other reasons to start, I'll give you 2 more. You can run sign-up ads from top brands, the ones that you recognize, and it won't take your precious users out of your app. Go to appleads.com, that's appleads.com, to sign up. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. Here's a riddle. How do you build native cross-platform mobile applications quickly without having to rewrite code and hire consultants at a huge cost? Titanium from Appcelerator. Called the easy button for mobile application development, it allows you to focus more on what's important, getting product out the door. Join the more than 1.5 million active developers who have created over 13,000 apps at www.appcelerator.com. Hello everybody, welcome to Untether.tv. This is the place where you come to expect casual conversations with mobile rock stars, and we're going to deliver again. This is a really great session we're about to have right now with Sam Zaid, who is the co-founder of a company called GetAround. And there's a big history here because Sam is an Ottawa resident, or was an Ottawa resident, Ottawa, Canada, and moved to the Valley to succeed with GetAround.com. And also recently was a TechCrunch Disrupt winner in New York City as the winner of TechCrunch Disrupt for GetAround.com. But there's a whole lot of history here, and the only way I can do this is really kind of give you a perspective of who Sam is through his bio that I found. Which is, he's an Entrepreneur of the Year award for Ernst & Young for 2009. He's a Google Scholarship recipient and an alumni of the Singularity University Graduate Studies. He's that's the program in Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. He's founded an organization here in Ottawa called Fresh Founders, which is a bunch of absolutely aggressive Type A personalities driving the growth of the entrepreneurial spirit in the city of Ottawa. And he's just a core technology entrepreneur, and his latest venture is something called GetAround, which has been labeled, and maybe we can dispel this label through this conversation, but the Airbnb of automobile rentals, if you can believe this. And we're going to dive into a little bit, probably a better description of what GetAround is. So all the way from San Francisco, Sam, man, thanks for coming and doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rob. It's great to be here virtually.
Well, it's a, San Francisco, Ottawa, similarities, right? Very clearly tech startups, hubs, lots and lots of cash flowing through both cities and excitement. But certainly on the excitement side, is that an accurate description of what GetAround is? Like the Airbnb, like everything's the, right? So is it... Do you get sick of that? The Airbnb of car rentals?
No, I mean it's an accurate description. It's probably the best analogy we have right now. We are big fans of Airbnb, so no, we actually like being associated with those guys.
Well, the only difference is that you're not sleeping in the car; you're renting it to drive, right? So,
that's the assumption.
Well, maybe if somebody's going to rent it to me for $5 an hour, maybe that's a good idea. I'll rent it for 8 hours while I'm in San Francisco. And sleep there is probably cheaper than staying in a hotel. There's a new business model.
Yeah.
Before we reinvent, Sam, why don't we just go through, for those people who have not heard about GetAround, what is it?
Sure. Well, so here in the United States, we have over 250 million cars. And those cars sit around unused about 22 hours of each day.
Mm-hmm.
So GetAround is basically a new way for people to share those cars we already have. So instead of buying a car, you can just rent one from someone nearby. And as a car owner, conversely, you can rent out your car and earn potentially thousands of dollars a year sharing it with other people.
So so this is a pretty disruptive space, obviously, that you're kind of forging here.
Right.
I mean, where does this idea come from? Just the fact that you're wandering around and you're seeing basically parking lots full of cars and cars on the street and they're not being used while people are in their office? What was the inspiration for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, that was partially what it was. And more generally, we call this problem car overpopulation. And so when you look around, you're like, geez, we're really overpopulated with cars relative to people and parking spaces. But the original sort of genesis for the idea came when I was a student at Singularity University. And we were actually looking sort of 20 years out at the horizon of transportation. And you think, okay, what is transportation going to look like in 20 years? And well, obviously we don't have a right answer, and nobody has the right answer, but you can sort of postulate that, if things like the autonomous car came to be, and you sort of snapped your fingers, and in an instant, all the cars around you were autonomous, then a lot of the assumptions on transportation really sort of, just disappear, or they no longer make sense anyway. So things from parking spots to whether you'd even own a car to, the need for traffic lights and stop signs and all that stuff, you start to question sort of all of our infrastructure. And so that was, it's an interesting thought experiment to run through.
I love it.
And then, as you step back in time, you start thinking about, the smartphone and connected cars and what happens when you put more computing power in cars and the electric vehicle. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity in there. And just one of them happens to be that, it really doesn't seem like the trend is going to be towards trying to own cars as much once you have sort of these smarter, more connected cars.
Well,
and that was sort of the initial genesis from which, arose GetAround.
So you kind of looked at outward, and then kind of scaled back to, okay, well, what can we apply today that in a number of years or in a few years will actually make sense based on where you think that the auto industry is going to end up going.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely it. And then looking at some of the trends, one of the things that they preach and really, really preach at Singularity is, look, what are the trends that are really accelerating technologically?
Yeah.
And so obviously one of those is the smartphone. And so, mobile computing is a really hot trend. It's, growing like gangbusters.
Yep.
And even 2 years ago, you could sort of see that was coming down the pipe. And so, when we looked at that, plus this sort of macro trend on transportation, it seemed to make a lot of sense.
It's such a funny thing to start to think about where this industry is going to go, because I don't think that 20 years or 30 years ago people were looking at the auto industry thinking, listen, this is going to automobiles are going to be a blip, right? Or the ownership of automobiles are going to be a blip. It's going to be a blight. It's going to be kind of a 150-year time cycle where all of a sudden it'll be these massive companies grow, build, get government subsidies, build again, and then everybody goes out and spends $25,000 on a car, and then the next generation doesn't buy cars, right?
Yeah.
It's a great vision. I love that idea. It saved me a lot of money every month and every year. But how? So you start at the low hanging fruit, right? Like the low end, which is, listen, there's a problem here. 22 out of the 24 hours in a day, these cars sit idle. We gotta solve that problem. Explain how this works.
Okay. Well, so I mean, if you are familiar with Airbnb, that's a good starting point. But essentially, if you have a car, you can go on the GetAround website. You can list it, upload photos, and a description of the car. You can say when it's available for rent. So when you regularly don't use it. And then as a renter, either from our iPhone app or from the website, you can go on and browse the cars around you. You can then rent the car from somebody, and that process of rental can work a couple of ways, but most generally you request to rent the car from the owner. The owner gets to check out who you are, maybe they're your friend or neighbor or a coworker, and then they approve the rental, and then at that point you've essentially rented the car. If you've got a smartphone and if the car is equipped with some of our in-car technology we call the car kit, then you can actually walk up to the car and use your phone to pop open the doors and get inside, and then the keys securely in the car, and you drive away.
And then it's monitored. Like the immediate thing that whenever I talk to somebody about what you guys are up to, the immediate thing is, well, somebody's just going to drive away and keep driving. Like they're going to get into the car and they're going to keep going, and going. But But ultimately, I mean, there has to be a relationship. You have a credit card, something on file that ties it to that person who's actually driven away with the car.
I mean, we have a social profile, so like a Facebook profile. We have a credit card, and we also have a driver's license because we actually run a driver record check before anybody can rent a car. So we have a fair amount of identifying information. Then on top of that, cars equipped with a car kit can also, if we need to, track the location of the car or hunt it down. That's totally another safeguard that's built into the hardware. And we haven't had any problems with that, but certainly it's something to be cautious of for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's there's corner cases and everything.
Yeah,
it's the same reason why people didn't want to do online banking. When banking was in its infancy, it was like, well, you can transfer money from one of my accounts to another or pay one of my bills. And so what's the challenge with online banking? Same thing with what you're doing is that there's enough security around protecting the car so that somebody's not going to drive it off. What about insurance?
So we include insurance. It's included as part of each rental. We've cut a deal with Berkshire Hathaway to provide insurance. And so what happens when you rent a GetAround car is that we fold the insurance into that, and for the duration of the rental from start to finish, the renter and the owner and GetAround are covered by our insurance policy, and it provides collision, comprehensive, and liability coverage. So essentially complete insurance for that period.
It's pretty amazing. And what's the reaction been? I mean, people are renting cars, people are putting their cars up. I mean, is it kind of what you expected to see this early in this type of industry, or are you surprised by the activity that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we're always surprised at how cool it is. But it's gone really well. People are really receptive to it. I think it's about people have had this latent frustration with transportation and cars for a long time, and so anything we can do to make our whole transportation grid more efficient, I think consumers are ready to welcome.
All right. Well, so I mean, the inspiration obviously is about forward thinking, working your way back. I love that approach because it's you might actually solve a problem as a result of kind of starting at the wouldn't it be cool phase and then working up, right? You kind of want to get when you're looking for an idea, you kind of want to project and then bring it down and then say, wow, that's cool, as opposed to, wouldn't it be cool if we could build flying cars? And then work upwards from that. So, I mean, but I got to say that this is a leap technology, right? So, how was the process of starting something like this? When you brought this up to some people, your circle, and then you kind of took it out and went out to investors or started to look for customers, and build the technology out. I mean, what was their reaction to something like this?
Yeah, I think that's been an interesting story. I mean, I think early on, it was essentially the reaction was, "You're crazy." That was sort of the starting reaction. People will never do this. People will never share cars. No insurance carrier will ever insure this, and you'll end up with just a fleet of a beater fleet of cars that no one will ever want to rent. And so that's basically your starting point. And then I think as things like Airbnb have taken off and this whole collaborative consumption movement has sort of taken hold, it's become more believable. And then obviously as things have become more tangible and we've had real outputs and real technology, then I think people start to look at it and go, yeah, maybe this is possible.
So what's kind of been the hardest, the biggest challenge that you kind of you look back now? I mean, I'm sure that every day there's always a challenge that you're kind of getting over that hurdle, like you said, like insuring the company, finding the cars, the clients. But was there one thing that you just kind of look at and say, like, was it funding? Was it awareness making? What was the biggest thing that you've found to date that's been the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge, I think the biggest challenge has been that it's been a massive. There's a lot of pieces to this type of business, and so putting them all together in a way that is consistent has been a pretty big challenge.
Yeah.
So just the coherence of things. Certainly, technology and doing hardware is a big challenge, and a lot of them, and not to underestimate the insurance, which is in and of itself also a massive challenge.
Right.
And, we've got a lot of no's before finally getting a yes.
So what, Sam, what does the revenue model for this thing look like? You've got to be able to drive revenue. It's very important. And as you're going out after investors, you've got to be able to convince them that this is in fact something that people will pay for, and you can make a good profit. How are you guys going to do that?
Well, the revenue model is actually pretty straightforward. So as part of each rental, we charge the renter. We retain a 40% commission, and we pass the remaining 60% to the car owner. Out of that 40% commission is how we provide our insurance and 24/7 roadside assistance.
So that's it. It's a straight up, and I can actually dictate how much I want to charge for the car, or is there a scale that I'm allowed to that I have to be within?
No, it's a marketplace, so you can dictate the price. We do have some limitations on the scale currently, but in the fullness of time, you'll be able to set whatever price you like.
Really, that's pretty interesting, because you can start to look at analytics for that to say, they have that chart that says what is the most stolen car in North America, right? And it's always a Toyota Camry or something like that for some reason. But ultimately, and I always park next to the Camry, right? I mean that's a strategy. Well, they're going to steal that car. But you can start to use the analytics based on that marketplace. It becomes like a stock index of valuation of cars. If it's not renting for $10 an hour, and you drop it down to $8 an hour, what does that do for the actual value of the list price of that car or the resale value of that car? Do you ever think about I know it's early, but do you ever think about those kind of analytics around the numbers that you guys can be collecting? Data is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of data that we can collect that's powerful, like in a number of different ways, for sure. I mean, more on price analytics for us is really just trying to help people figure out how they should price their car, and how each car at a given price would rent in terms of volume. And so that's something we're looking at. As far as listing prices, now it's not something that we've really looked at yet. And I think for company maybe like eBay Motors, that might be more interesting to them, and perhaps they'll want to license that data. But for us, it's really just about really, tuning the experience, honing the experience, and getting people, it's certainly a challenge when you list your car for the first time. What is my rental rate? I have no idea. Yeah.
So the revenue is pretty straightforward. You take your cut after all of, so it's a 40-60 split for GetAround. You take out all of the insurance costs and the roadside assistance and all the administration, and there's profit built in for every hour that a car is rented. And then obviously it's a scale thing. So how do you do that? How do you get out of San Francisco and get into Lincoln, Nebraska, or Missouri, or Ottawa? How do you get that big where it's like GetAround is the brand, like Virtue Car, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I can answer that question yet, but I think part of it is just the nature of the model. It's a very organic model. Obviously we plug very heavily into the social graph.
Yes. And
so we really just want to empower car owners everywhere to share their cars, and then they can begin to create really small, hyper local communities of people who share cars in Lincoln, Nebraska, or in Ottawa, or in California, or in South Bay or East Bay, and it really just brings car sharing everywhere. And our mission at the highest level is we see car overpopulation as a real problem. It causes a host of secondary problems with respect to parking demands and congestion and traffic and pollution. And so, if we can solve that problem, then I think we've really made a difference in society. And one way to do that is to really make car sharing, as prevalent as car ownership and as viable an alternative to car ownership. And I think today it's been, people like car sharing in big cities, they sort of know what it is, but it's been very niche. And so if we can make that something that, I can buy a car with the intention that I might share it with a handful of people, and, it doesn't matter where you are, but you can do that, then I think, we'll have achieved our mission, and we'll also have made car sharing that much more pervasive.
So why hasn't it? I mean, there are some companies that are doing this in varying stages, and but why hasn't it taken it off? And I mean, what's been holding it back? I mean, it's great for the environment, it's great for your city, it's easy on the pocketbook, but why hasn't it taken it off?
Well, I mean, I think it's partially a number of things. So one of them is mobile technology for sure. I think the smartphone is a great enabler in that regard. And I think the second one is insurance. And, up until recently, I don't think the insurance companies had the appetite for it.
Yeah.
There's a general trend in insurance these days towards what they call pay-as-you-drive insurance, which is sort of like usage-based or insurance by the mile. You can think of it that way. And so, there's been this discussion ongoing in the insurance industry. And so, these new types of insurance coupled with this new technology, I think sort of just opened up the market a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you envision a point in time where you're kind of you're at the mall or you're at the grocery store and you've got all your groceries and it's a debate between calling a cab or pulling out your smartphone and finding a GetAround car in the parking lot, and the cost structure is such that it would cost me less or equivalent to take a cab than it would to just pop in my rent a car for an hour to take my groceries home.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two different transportation modes, really, cabs versus driving a car or renting a car. Mainly because a cab is sort of a one-way trip where you're heading somewhere.
Yeah.
It may not have the utility that you're looking for, but it gets you from A to B. Whereas a get-around car is really more something that you can rent from one location, do whatever you have to do if it is groceries, and then drive it back to the same location.
Right.
But I think the comparison is actually, would I take a get-around car for an hour to do my groceries, or would I take a cab to the grocery store, do my groceries and then cab back? And the way we look at it is in that regard. So there is a little bit of competition with taxi companies, but more than that, it tends to be a lot more complementary because of the fact that they're really targeting one-way type of rentals or one-way trips, and we're really two-way trips.
Well, I mean, I can see a point in time like there's an instance like in San Francisco, it costs you $100 to get from your house to the airport, right? It costs $100 without traffic, and even in a small town like Ottawa, it's $50, right? $50 to get to an airport. So, at some point when you've got enough volume, it would be great if I could take my car or rent a car and then have somebody on the flip side bring it back. You know what I mean? So you kind of
totally.
It becomes a two-way.
Yeah, and I think you hit it dead on in that the concept of doing that works really well around airports. Potentially because people drive to an airport, they leave their car there for a number of days, and there's always traffic heading the other direction, and it tends to be a much more symmetrical flow. And so, totally, that's totally possible on airports. If it's not clear to us that it's possible more generally than that yet, but around airports for sure.
So, I mean, there's so many questions that pop into my mind because when you bounce up against an idea that you are literally promoting, it's like it's early days in what you're doing. How important is something like winning TechCrunch Disrupt to kind of getting the word out, getting in front of those guys that are on the panel, like, and then kind of getting their nod to say, out of all of these companies, you're not a social check-in software, you're not a cloud play, you're literally taking a hard, solid good and, for every idle hour trying to generate some dollars for the owner and some good for society. How important was TechCrunch to you guys?
I guess it would depend if you asked me before or after TechCrunch, but certainly after, I would say it was massive. I think it was important for us.
Because you won, right?
It worked out really well.
Yeah.
And, obviously couldn't have said we were going to win going in. But, I think it's done a couple of things. First and foremost, for us, it's been great. It's really put us on the map. And it was sort of our official launch party where we really just, went on the world stage and made announcements. And so in that regard, I think it was great for us. I think more generally, it was also really good for the industry as a whole, just in terms of validating the model and validating the space and the credibility and validation it brings to just the concept of peer-to-peer car sharing or peer-to-peer anything that has to do with the real good, I think is huge.
Well, Sam, why did you win? Do you know?
Well, you'd have to ask the judges.
Right. You must get a sense. It's like, some of those companies, and I've sat with a bunch of the, the guys that you beat. Beat is a terrible word, but, the guys that didn't win. So, what was it? What do you think it was about the idea that it was innovative, that it was just something unique and unique application of mobile and real world?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can only speculate. But for one, I think the competition at TechCrunch was pretty fierce. There were some really cool companies there, so it was an honor to win. I think part of it probably has to do with just the general trend in collaborative consumption. It's a really hot space. People are looking at all sorts of business models in there. I think investors tend to like marketplace business models, so that was another thing that was favorable. And I think we're the only company that really did hardware, which is really uncommon in sort of the web space. Certainly in a typical TechCrunch company, I think there's not that much hardware, and so I think that was something that just made us stand out a little bit.
Yeah, and certainly there's big plays, and there's got to be some IP, right? There's got to be something here that is you can protect a little bit, because we've seen a lot of companies that have come up that have not a lot of protection. The idea is a cool idea, but can be replicated fairly quickly. So a hardware play. Have you ever done that before, hardware?
I haven't really built hardware before. No, I mean I did hardware stuff. I was a long time ago. I was a photonics engineer at Nortel, so we did a lot of hardware there, but it was much more sophisticated than what we're doing at GetAround at this stage. But I don't call myself a hardware designer by any means. Well,
I mean, it's an interesting play. So you finish with TechCrunch, you go home a winner, and you're obviously, for something like this, for scale and for for awareness making and to get into those little communities, the neighborhoods. You're going to have to raise money for this thing. You're going to have to build some kind of war chest of cash to be able to create awareness. Even if you're doing it social, you still have to build this out. So you're obviously looking into raising money, more money.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but I mean the reaction from some of the guys that you've approached for the investment. Do they get it? Are they interested? Do they kind of look at you like you're crazy? Is it that same kind of thing when you brought up the idea to your friends?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it varies. First of all, I think now people are a lot more keen and interested. A year or two ago, totally different discussion. But I think the space, obviously with Airbnb doing so well recently in fundraising, I think there's a lot of interest in and around the collaborative consumption space.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, Airbnb, I think what is their valuation, like $9 billion or something like that. I think it's $400 million or $500 million the valuation for Airbnb, which started off as a lark and an idea, as a fun thing to participate in, and now it's that's a substantial business that it's generating from it. And I think it took them 3 or 4 years to kind of get a little bit more awareness around that. What's your time frame for this thing? Do you think that this is this accelerates faster than something like Airbnb?
Yeah, I mean, I think Airbnb was probably a little bit earlier on in the curve, so naturally would accelerate slower. In our case, we already have a number of competitors popping up, and I think people can make the sort of tangential leap to Airbnb for cars, given that they understand Airbnb a little bit easier than sort of the initial pioneering of collaborative consumption generally. So I think it will go quicker. I mean, how much quicker? It's hard to say. Obviously, our models are very different. There's the level of the local aspect to GetAround is very different than Airbnb, and so I think that'll probably slow down the speed at which it'll scale. But on the flip side, I think the market is moving quicker. So I don't really know how those two balance out.
It's funny because bringing a stranger into your house is drastically different than bringing a stranger into your car, right? I don't love my car. I love my family though, and so I'll lend you my car, but I might not lend you a bed, right? So it's funny though, the kind of how we're enamored with our cars. We think it's an extension. I know people who look outside and say, "I wish I could cover my car. It seems lonely out there." Right? That's not a guy that's going to rent somebody their car or get somebody. They'd be more apt to bring somebody in their house.
Right.
All right. So a little bit forward thinking here. You talk about this. It's collaborative consumption. This industry that you're talking about.
Right.
I know of what you guys are doing. I know of some of the competitors that you have. I know what Airbnb is doing and some of the competitors that they have. And because this is a mobile show, I mean, where else do you see that these kind of opportunities land when it comes to collaborative consumption in the mobile space? That mobile enables this. Have you seen a good example of this? You're in the middle of the Bay Area. I mean, it's mobile hub, it's technology, it's investment. What have you seen out there that you kind of think, oh man, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be involved in these companies?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that I have that much time to pay attention to other companies.
Good answer. That's a good answer. Well, Rob, my head's down. I'm doing this.
Yeah. But I think more generally, to answer your question, I think what's interesting about the time, the market landscape now is that, computing and connectivity is sort of going everywhere. Like, with the smartphone, it's like everyone has a computer in their pockets. And that's a cliche thing to say, but I think what it's actually doing is really, people have tried these business models before. They tried them sort of in the late 90s and in the famed dot-com boom. And they didn't totally work out. And one of the reasons they didn't work out is just connectivity just wasn't that ubiquitous.
Right.
And so now that it is, I think you can start to really impact, sort of older world models or more physical things that are sort of more physical domain more readily than you could maybe 10 years ago.
There's a lot of talk about connected devices. So it really has a great play with what you're doing, obviously, because connected sensors in the streets, connected lights, connected street lights, and as a way to monitor what's going on inside of a city, and ultimately what you've created is, and I'm not going to put this in your word, but you've created ultimately a black box that goes into a car that which is what your solution is. Do you see an opportunity down the road? I'm big on data, and the more data you collect, the more value the company can achieve, obviously, by either having the data, honing their practices, or else leveraging that data to talk about trends in automotive use and that kind of stuff. Do you see that what you're building could quite possibly be a black box for automobiles?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, I think collecting data is obviously very powerful and can help us hone our experience. On the flip side, you have to be careful what data you collect because these are consumers, there are privacy concerns, and those are all things like we take very seriously. So we don't collect that much currently, and we haven't really figured out where that boundary is between privacy and I guess no privacy and collecting too much
creepiness.
Data. Yeah, and for us it's important. I mean, we trust and our community and our users are what will make us succeed if we succeed, and so we can't overstep our boundaries in that regard. I do think more generally that there is a lot of opportunity by putting computing technology in cars, and we are doing that in one specific domain, but I think there's a number more of them.
Yeah, I mean, Google with their driverless cars, and I mean, certainly every one of these cars, from what I read, is eventually going to be Wi-Fi enabled, hub access. We have a company here in Ottawa, very well, QNX. Not only are they building the Playbook OS for RIM, but they're also building, for a number of cars, their in-dash system, computing system, which is a pretty powerful thing. It's not just about wayfinding anymore. It's about it's about connectivity in the cars. So getting pollen reports, something silly like that about your destination, and congestion and traffic are small examples of that. But certainly you can see a point in time where GetAround is built right into something like that, and leverages that technology without requiring a hardware play or a separate box. You hope that day comes.
Oh yeah, for sure. That would be very cool.
That's an OEM play. So doing this and then going after investment, building this company out, and just from a Canadian perspective, is there do you limit the ability to get into Canada because of insurance practices? What's the biggest thing that's going to stop, the biggest hurdle that you've got about going outside of California and outside of the States?
I think Canada is a little bit easier from an insurance point of view than other parts of the world potentially. There are also people are familiar with people crossing the border, and so insurance is something that I think companies down here are a little bit more familiar with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the limiting for us right now, the limiting factor, eventually I think it will be insurance. Right now, it's just that we're still working on the product, getting product market fit, really making the experience great, and we don't want to, sort of scale prematurely.
I like that idea, and it's only on the iOS, right? Is that the first phone that you've made this work on?
So far, it's only on iOS, correct? It's only on the iPhone, actually. Yeah.
It's only on the iPhone. So at some point, you're going to have to branch out, and that's the strategy to move into the other popular devices: Android, Windows Phone.
Is Windows Phone a popular device?
I don't know. I start to think about fleet management and the FedEx trucks using GetAround, right? And I think what would they be carrying aside from their own devices? But BlackBerries, right, or something to that extent on the enterprise. I mean, fleet management could be a huge market for you guys, where it's like or bus drivers, right? They just leave the bus wherever they are, and it gets picked up without having to drive back to the terminal or whatever the approach is. Planes, right? Rentals of planes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's our next generation plane kit. It comes out in a month.
Well, from what you described, it's like the next generation is going to be like the hover car, right?
Right.
That's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be, you're going to be able to rent a flying car, which is
might be a couple generations, but yeah, right.
Well, you never know, man. You never know. People are inventing this
Very
stuff
true.
right now.
Well, I mean, I think Nevada has just passed regulation to allow autonomous cars. So.
Yep. And in fact, I think that there's they also I heard this on one of Leo Laporte's podcasts that they actually also allowed for flying cars. It's basically a plane that can land, like you can drive it on the street, but it's a plane first. But Nevada seems to be the place to be to innovate in these things. So watch out for flying cars and autonomous cars in the state of Nevada, because they're both there at this moment. Right? You'll get landed on. Last question about this is that when you start to look at the accelerant that you're looking for with this with GetAround, how hard is it to kind of focus on we're just talking about flying cars and autonomous cars, and how hard is it for you to focus on what needs to get done because of the opportunity that mobile does bring to the economy and the opportunities as an entrepreneur? I mean, you've done a lot of businesses, and it's and I think the curse of the entrepreneur is that it's like the shiny new thing, right? And is it a challenge for you to be able to just sit there and focus on the thing that you've got to get done, or do you kind of look over and say, "Oh man, wouldn't it be great?"
No, I mean it's not a challenge at all. I mean the whole company is very heads down and focused, and there's so much to do. It's such a new space and a new model that there's just so many things to figure out that you just don't really have time to look around.
Well, I mean, a great answer, Sam. It's certainly what the space that you're in. You're among very few who are doing this at this point, and there's bound to be competition. And I think competition is the greatest indication that you're onto something. If you're alone in a market, you start to get very worried. And so having competition is great. Now you just have to outperform what those guys are doing, and then ultimately there's enough room here for more than one company, I would say, as long as everybody's profitable in the long run. I got to ask, what am I not asking you? What's the question that I'm not asking you that you're dying to get off? Is there anything that I've missed?
I wasn't really thinking about that, to be honest. I think you've asked a good set of questions. I mean, a lot of the typical ones, as well as a bunch of sort of more unusual, intellectually stimulating ones. I don't know.
All right. Well.
You got me with that question.
I did. Well, there you go. That's the good question to end on. And I mean, how do people find out more about what you guys are doing? Are you available? Is GetAround in any city, or are you limiting the scale of this right now until you get it right?
That's a good question. So we are in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and we've also got some cars in Southern California, around San Diego. But our core focus really is the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay. However, we are looking to go to a number of new cities soon. And so if people are interested in GetAround coming to their city, they should actually sign up for our website. So if you sign up for our website, that counts as a vote for your city.
Yep.
And we'll use that data to sort of figure out where we go next. So and I think that's one thing I definitely want to get across in this in this podcast.
What does it take? What does it take to get into that city, though? I mean, are you just looking for demand? Because obviously you want to have enough cars there for rent in the city. Is there a threshold that you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, the threshold obviously varies by city and population density and specific geography, but it's really for us to understand, like, where are people really screaming for this, and who has the biggest transportation pains right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously if a more populous city might have more votes, but, you know, per capita might have lower total sort of votes. And so for us, it's really just an indicator of who's feeling the pain of car overpopulation the most, and how can we help them sooner.
Yeah, it's the cities like London in the UK that you know, have a downtown tax to bring your car in. You know, it's funny that people accept it. They just sit back, and this is what I love about GetAround, is that it breaks that thinking, is that they just accept the fact that there's, you know, it's £8 to get into the city of London with a car, right? It's £8. Oh yeah, of course it is. Oh no, of course it takes 2 hours to get where I need to go, because that's just what it does. It's the same thing in New York and the same thing in San Francisco. And that's what I think about it, is that I love about GetAround is the fact that people thought you were crazy. People still think that you're crazy about this idea, and usually it's the crazy ideas that you don't want to come up with an idea that people accept right away, because then it's not a great idea. It's not pushing the boundaries, which is one of the great things about GetAround. And when I heard about this endeavor, it was it blew my mind, simply because this is one of those ideas that people will think is crazy, but will disrupt an industry. And whether it's GetAround or a combination of companies that are doing this, I think that it's well on its way to solving a bunch of issues, and attacking two different fronts. One of them is that there is over car population, of course, and they do sit idle. But the other thing is that for every hour that it sits idle, it's costing me money. So I might as well, start making money off of the assets that are inactive right now. So I just need you, Sam, to come up with one for my kids, so I can rent out my kids for a couple of hours and make some money off of them while they're still young. How's that? Next challenge?
Yeah, next challenge. Yeah, it'll be kid around or nanny around or something.
Exactly. Well, oh man, how do people find out more about what you guys are up to?
I mean, standard channels. Come to our website, www.getaround.com. Download our iPhone app. There's a lot of information there. Call 1-866-GetAround if you'd like to talk to one of us, and we can help sort of walk you through the entire process.
And get on there and vote for your city if you want it to be in. Actually, sign up from your city if you want it to be in your city. Which is, if you want to rent your car, why not? Why not accelerate this? Get your friends to do it. It'll be like the American Idol of voting. Bring GetAround to your city. Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm talking to you, because there's only four cars in Lincoln. Right? Wow.
Sure. Soon, hopefully.
So get to GetAround.com, at GetAround on Twitter, 1-866-GetAround on the phone. You'll see certainly the list of cars that are available for rent. There's some pretty cool cars there, some rare cars. I suppose that this is going to be something that you're going to start to see more and more people renting out, exclusive cars for a high price, which is great. But go to GetAround.com. There's a Roadster there, isn't there?
Yeah, we have 3 Tesla Roadsters now, actually. Three of them. Aren't there like 8 in all of the U.S.? It's a limited run Roadster, right? Limited run, yeah, but a few more than 8. But yeah, no, we've got I think a Tesla in San Francisco, one in Sunnyvale, and one in San Diego.
Nice. Well, I mean, go and check them out. You'll find out everything on their website. Actually will show you how this service works, and some of the prices are very affordable. As I said, you could probably sleep in them for cheaper than you can stay in San Francisco, which is not a bad idea if they have an air freshener in the car. I'm going to leave it at that. Sam, I really appreciate you coming on and actually living through this. I love what you're doing with GetAround. I think that it's a disruptive service that has his time has come, and I wish you all the best. And thanks for doing this.
No, thank you. It was great. It was very fun.
Yes. Hopefully you'll say that when you watch the whole thing. I appreciate your patience. And for those of you who are still watching and listening to this, of course, I love the fact that you do that each and every week and each and every episode. So thank you. Keep coming back. If you have any comments, suggestions, criticisms, or if you'd like to see some guests, reach out at untether@gmail.com. I respond every single email that comes in. So blast me. I don't mind. Untether@gmail.com, or just come to untether.tv. So thank you for watching. Sam, thank you for being a part of this. And we will see you next time on Untether.tv.
Thanks, Rob.